What the city is talking about. This is Montreal Now on News Talk Radio, CJAD 800.
And if we have to do some clarification on the directive, we will do so. It's too important to respect the rights of the Anglophone community when we're talking about healthcare. If we have to change the wording, we'll do so.
That's Jean-François Roberge from my interview with him earlier this afternoon. The directive, of course, he's referring to is the one issued by the OQLF, which included the need to show an English eligibility certificate if you wanted to get, we thought, if you wanted to get served in English at a hospital, to which he says, no, you won't even be asked for it. That's simply not the case. James Mennie of the Montreal Gazette standing by. Jim, you heard the interview. I'm curious for your take on this. Are you buying what they're selling?
First of all, I want to say, and I'm sorry if someone got there before I did, but I would urge all of our listeners to go to MontrealGazette.com, print out the open letter, have it laminated, and use that as your eligibility certificate, because you will, in fact, be asked for an eligibility certificate. Because when we got the open letter, Aaron Dressel, who's been, like I say, he's been breaking the story wide open, did a fact check on everything that is inside of it, and quite frankly, this is hot air. And I find it fascinating that it's Monsieur Roberge who's doing the walk of shame with English language media outlets to sort of explain himself and say, no, what's in the law? That's not there. Aaron, there were two things that struck me in his conversation with you this afternoon. First, and I think this is a clip you should take out and post on the site when he says, I don't know anything about the healthcare system. I'm the minister of the French language, okay? And then later on, you're talking about a caller who said he couldn't get any English language services at Pierre-Lagardère Hospital in Repentigny. And he said, well, no, you can go and, you can have someone try and translate. I would direct Monsieur Roberge's attention to Article 46.1 of Bill 96, Paragraph 3, that it restricts any employer from employing people whose job performance requires knowledge or a specific level of knowledge of a language other than the official language. In other words, if you can speak English, it's not exactly a career mover, okay? But the idea of him, can you imagine being in a hospital and somebody knocking on an OR door and say, hey, doc, you got a couple of minutes? I got an Anglo who needs some translation over here. That's not how it works. And the only thing that came across to me from your interview with Monsieur Roberge, which is a fine interview, but what came across to me is the very disquieting suggestion that Monsieur Roberge does not even know what's in his own law, that Monsieur Roberge has been given a bucket and a mop, metaphorically, to go out and try and clean up this giant pile of manure that this government has slid into, thinking that it would be able to get away with it. And thanks to the Gazette, thanks to CJAD, they have now been shamed into doing this. And when I say thanks to those two media outlets, I also point out that I have a sneaking suspicion that one of the people we ought to have been talking to is Eric Girard, a.k.a. the Invisible Man, when it comes to his portfolio of relations with Anglos. I have a sneaking suspicion, Aaron, that Monsieur Girard's phone began to ring by getting calls from people perhaps outside of Quebec, people with a lot of money to invest in Quebec, saying, what the hell are you people doing in there? Why would I want to start my factory here with my monoglot, insert foreign country word going in there? How am I supposed to recruit my skilled employees when you people can't, even guarantee health care in a language other than French, which is exactly what happened this week. I have never seen 3 cabinet ministers of any provincial government turn around and do this kind of, mea culpa / don't worry, be happy public relations exercise. This is exactly what has happened. And the real test, as far as I'm concerned, will be when and if this meeting with the so-called, Anglo community takes place, and whether indeed the written elements of this law are changed, because they'll have to be. As I said at the beginning, this open letter, the text of this open letter is just hot air. It is absolutely worthless. Anything that matters is a law that was duly adopted by the National Assembly, Bill 96, which, by the way, when Monsieur Roberge was talking about how Randy Boissonneau, the federal minister of official languages, he was happy with the open letter. Apparently, the Trudeau Liberals are happy with having Bill 96 injected into the preamble of the Official Languages Act with little things like, French is the common language, is the official language of Quebec. And by the way, Quebec is a nation. I would not necessarily look at Monsieur Boissonneau's, thumbs up as being the kind of endorsement our listeners need to hear. If we see literal editing changes of the text of the law, maybe we can sleep a little bit easier. But until that happens, like I say, this is a very tedious public relations exercise produced exclusively at stopping this coverage, which has proved to be incredibly embarrassing to Francois Legault and to his cabinet.
Okay, so let me ask this question then to the issue of his explanation, Jean-François Roberge's explanation that this OQLF directive is simply geared towards administration. He used that word, Jim, administration. In other words, business internally within a hospital or social service and not to the patients. You're not buying that either.
Because it doesn't say that in the law, Aaron. This is the problem with this 31-page directive. It does not say that. And I'm very sorry. I mean, you can call a lawyer if you want, but they're going to say it doesn't matter. I mean, I've listened to Chris Demarcos often enough on this show to know what is said is worthless. What is written is what counts. And what is written in Bill 96 does not touch upon any of the things that this so-called open letter is pledging. As I say, we have to see changes, literally written changes in that law. Without that, I guarantee you, in 6 to 8 months, we'll be talking about, it was an overzealous employee at the hospital who interpreted Bill 96 to say, no, I can't give you English language health care.
I'm just going to say it this way because this is how it's coming across, Jim. And in hearing you talk about this and the administration part, which you seem to stress, you're suggesting here they're playing us for fools to some degree, are
yes,
you not?
I'm not suggesting. I'm telling you flat out. They got caught. They're trying to make this go away the way they tried to make McGill go away, okay? Having meetings and saying, oh, yeah, we're reaching out to you and whatever. Unless those changes are put into Bill 96 in writing, we are being played, okay? It's as simple as that. There is no middle ground here, and they know it. They completely know it. And the fact that this open letter from Christiane Dubé and from Ellen Girard and from Jean-François Roberge, and yet it's Jean-François Roberge who's doing all the heavy lifting on this, suggests to me that those two ministries turned around and said, you have dumped this huge, wheelbarrow of steaming manure on our desks, get it off now and make this go away. But as I say, an open letter is not going to be enough. Legislative amendments are the bare minimum that we can expect. Because the fact of the matter is, and we're sort of, and like everything else in Francois Legault's Quebec, discrimination becomes normalized. There is absolutely zero proof whatsoever that these provisions, that by limiting healthcare, the language of healthcare, you're protecting French. That is absolute garbage. Okay? That is just another example of how Francois Legault's little gnomes in the bureaucracy like to find new ways to try and make life difficult for non-francophones in Quebec. The problem is it's not going to work. The fact that we had this open letter this week shows it isn't going to work, and maybe they'll think twice before they decide to try and steamroll. Perhaps it's proving that English Quebec is a little more difficult to steamroll than Justin Trudeau.
So you think this meeting that allegedly is going to take place next week with the Quebec Anglophone community, let's say the QCGN, that's just a PR exercise and nothing else? Unless
there is a result from it, yeah, absolutely. If it's a matter of just repeating the open letter, saying don't worry, be happy, no. Tell me when these amendments will be adopted by the National Assembly. End of story.
Okay.
If you can't tell me that, you're just blowing smoke.
All right. James Mennie at the Montreal Gazette. Thank you, Jim. Have a good weekend.
You too, buddy.